Welcome back to Chopper's Political Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Now, before we start this podcast, I want to make clear we interviewed Michael Gove, the former Tory Cabinet Minister, now the editor of The Spectator, on Tuesday at a conference in East London before the comments made by Donald Trump about Ukraine and its leader, President Volodymyr Zelensky. Hope you enjoy it.
Coming up on Chopper's Political Podcast. I want to book called Michael Portillo, the future of the ranch. And I should really have called it Michael Portillo, the future of GB News Sunday morning.
Welcome back to Chopper's Political Podcast, where I bring you the best guest gossip and stories, normally from our studio in the heart of Westminster. But today, I'm in East London. This week, Parliament is in recess, but the political news hasn't stopped with Donald Trump and emergency EU meetings. The whole world turned their eyes to see if the end of the war in Ukraine is in sight. I'm joined this week on Chopper's Political Podcast by Michael Gove, the former Conservative Cabinet Minister and now the editor of The Spectator magazine. Michael, welcome to Chopper's Political Podcast.
It's an absolute pleasure. It's
great to have you on. It's great to have you on. There's so much I want to cover with you, but let's start about how you are. How is life after politics? Is there life after politics?
There is life after politics. So I'm now in the private sector.
Yeah, like I am. Yes.
Exactly, rather than relying on the taxpayer to pay my salary. And I think that we're both fascinated by politics, and it's a great privilege to be able to serve. But politics in the front line takes a lot out of you, and I think that certainly for the Conservative Party, it's time for a new generation to lead, and I'm very, very glad that the Conservative Party is in the hands of that rising new generation.
Has it changed much since you were at the Times and Scottish TV?
Yes.
Journalism, you're now watching from the stands rather than the pitch.
Yes, so journalism has changed a lot. So in the period when I was working both for the BBC and Scottish Television at once, and then the Times, it was the case that there were very traditional platforms, and news was consumed and opinion consumed in a very traditional way. Now there is much more of a mashup, as it were.
Yeah.
So on GB News, you will have your podcast, you will have live rolling news, but you will also have news stories that are breaking on the website.
Yes.
In the same way at The Spectator, we have the magazine. The latest circulation figures show us over 100,000, which is great.
Wow.
But at the same time, it's also the case that we update our website daily, as you do, and we also have our own podcasts and also our own TV channel, which, rather than rolling news, as GB News has, has long-form interviews with people in the news.
And it's almost overwhelming, isn't it? I mean, compared to the old days, when I first got the Telegraph, we had 2 meetings a day, you'd offer up ideas to the newspaper, they'd be talked about. You'd write often you'd write maybe 400, 500 words, and a paragraph would appear in the nib section on page 2. All the words I'd written had gone to waste, but now nothing goes to waste.
So no, exactly. I was talking to a Fleet Street editor the other day, and he said that one of the things he laments is the fact that in the old days there used to be the spike, literally a steel or metal spike on the news desk, and if you wrote your story and it wasn't good enough, on the spike it would go, not in the paper. Now, there's almost infinite space on our websites for copy, but you've got to be respectful of the reader and the viewer. So you've still got to curate it.
Yes.
You've still got to make sure that even if someone is writing something interesting but not quite good enough, you take it that little bit extra up. And that's what your producers do with TV News. They don't need to do it for you because you require no production. It's quality.
Well, Rebecca, my producer's laughing at that.
But what we do at The Spectator is that we're open to all contributors, and then we edit and make sure that it's there and accessible for the reader.
And the agenda. What's your view of journalism? You were once quite disparaging about our trade. You said, I won't be told some bloke turning up at 10 in the morning and writing his thoughts and going down the pub. You were a bit mean about journalists when you were in office. Do you remember saying that?
I don't remember that exactly, but I certainly said some things which were probably a bit
fruity.
I think that the truth is, there's an old quote from Enoch Powell, actually, which is that politicians who complain about the press are like sailors who are complaining about the sea.
Yes.
So you can occasionally be frustrated at the way in which you consider yourself to be misrepresented. You can occasionally be angry because the media are interested in something that you think isn't as important as the policy that you're so proud of. But you've got to recognise that newspapers, news channels live or die on what readers and viewers want to read and see. And your responsibility is to your viewers and GB News viewers and listeners to this podcast. If you don't ask tough questions, if you don't prize out...
They call you out for it.
Totally.
All the time.
And as a politician, you've got to accept that. And also as a politician, you've got to try to get over yourself, as it were. It's not about you as an individual. It's not about your ego. It's about trying to win the argument. And if you're going to win the argument, then you've got to be ready for tough questions.
Are you sympathetic to the politicians you now write about? Because you're unusually... You're editing a national news magazine and you're writing about people who you were in that position a year ago.
I do have some sympathy, but I also think it's important to put the readers first. So that sympathy can allow me and the people with whom I work to explain some of the dilemmas with which politicians are faced. But even if you appreciate that for the sake of argument, whoever is Chancellor of the Exchequer at the moment is not going to find it easy. There are no easy answers to our economic plight. Nevertheless, if you do something foolish, like slapping an inheritance tax on family farms or scrapping the winter fuel payment for pensioners without any proper explanation of why, then...
Apart from saying it's a black hole.
Yeah, quite. Yeah. Then you will have and you will deserve challenge and criticism. So I hope what you get at Spectator, and its reflection, of course, in your interviewing style as well, is robust questions, but also an acceptance that politicians are operating within constraints. You've got to respect that.
Yes. And your old friends in politics, are they different with you now you're a journalist? Or they...
Yes.
Are they all confessional?
I think again, there are sort of levels of friendship, as it were. And so all of us will sometimes be told things by friends that the journalistic bit of us will think, ooh,
yes,
great story.
Yes.
But... we sometimes
value the friendship more than the...
We sometimes have to respect the fact that we may be in a position where the friendship and the duty and responsibility of the individual who shared something with you matter.
Yes.
And so, if you are having a drink with someone who is a civil servant in the Ministry of Defence and they let slip something about national security,
yes,
you're going, wow.
Well, you are Privy Councillor.
Respect. Exactly.
So you've got a duty to the King not to disclose that.
Indeed.
Which may get in the way of your journalism at some point in the future.
It might well.
You may be called in for a Privy Council check out the conversation. Are you surprised about how little we know looking in? I love it. I mean, the iceberg theory, I'm obsessed with. When you were, the big jobs you had in government, of which there are many, you saw the whole iceberg. Now you just see above the waterline, and that isn't a lot, is it? I mean, there's a lot we don't know.
Yes.
A known unknown.
The knowledge quickly fades. So when you're in government, there is a lot that you know that isn't known by definition outside. But time moves on, and the policies and the personalities change.
Yes.
But I'd say two things from having been in. One, sometimes you think that's totally wrong.
Yeah.
There is someone who's writing this with great authority, and that is, to use a professional political term, bollocks. But then there are other times where you read things, often used to be the case under your byline at the Telegraph or Steve Swinford at the Mail, Katie Balls in the Spectator. Bloody hell.
Yeah.
Bloody hell. How did they know that?
Yes.
There are some political editors and correspondents who seem almost to know the details of policy formulation even before the Secretary of State does. So there's a huge, spectrum.
Yes.
Between the truly well-informed and those who take flyers.
Yes.
And
you can see both of them when you're in New York. Do you leave a letter for your successor, Angela Rayner, in her desk, or what did it say?
I didn't.
Why not?
I did have a word with her at the Spectator Parliamentarian of the Year Awards.
What was the advice you gave her?
You have a great team of civil servants in this department, and particularly good team in private office, and they will serve you very well. It's certainly, from what I hear at one remove, Angela's been one of the more successful, relative, but one of the more successful members of this government.
On the planning reforms.
Exactly, and certainly is well liked by the people in that department.
It's going further than you could go.
Yes.
I remember your great speech you gave at the REBA, the Royal Institute for British Architects. I think it was December last year, the 2023.
At the end of 2023.
And then it all just ran into sand. And I mean, yes, you had a big battle there with your own MPs, I think.
Yes, to an extent. And to be fair to Angela Rayner, some of what she's been doing both on planning reform but also doubling down on the growth of Cambridge.
Yes.
Stuff we wanted to do couldn't get over the line, so fair play to her.
The boys could do that, can't they? And when did you decide to quit? So you surprised us all.
Yes, I was.
I remember this interview on the bus, back in goodness June. We chatted away about politics in the future.
I was slithering.
Scottish term, that slithering.
About what to do were an election to be called this time last year. And then, of course, when the election was called,
Which was earlier than you thought, I'm guessing.
earlier than almost any of us thought, I felt I've got to decide within 24 hours.
Yes.
I can't hang around. And in the end, I thought, you've got to have a hunger and an appetite and an energy for politics to be able to contribute. So rather than being, the old guy at the back of the room and say, oh, you should do it like this, in my day we did it like that, better to make way, next generation of talent.
And you weren't sure who the new leader would be if you lost either. So,
No.
looking back on your time in 14 years, very experienced, a real mover in government. What was your biggest achievement?
It's very difficult to mark your own homework or to be judging your own case. But I think the area where we made the biggest difference, and this was a team effort, was in education.
Yeah.
And I'm reassured that we did the right thing because the international league tables, the comparison of how England did against other countries, shows that English students now are better readers, better at maths, better at science than they were 10 or 15
Helped by
years
phonics.
Oh, completely.
Nick Gibb, your colleague.
This is the thing I stress. It wouldn't have happened without the political support of David Cameron and George Osborne. Actually, also Nick Clegg and David Laws. But it really wouldn't have happened without the hard work of Nick Gibb.
Yeah.
So I think that was probably the most consequential area. And we know that it worked because Scotland and Wales, children are just as clever, but they pursued different policies. They didn't have the same degree of autonomy for schools. They didn't have the same degree of rigour in the curriculum. And so they've fallen behind in those league tables. And, I said that, English schools now are in the position of Liverpool, Scottish schools in the position of Partick Thistle. There is no comparison. And that's a tragedy for me because, as you know, I grew up in Scotland, went to school in Scotland, and it's a sadness, but it does show that the right policies can make a difference.
And how does it feel watching Bridget Phillipson unpick those?
I do worry.
Yeah.
There was some good news, I think, over the weekend when she said that she was going to keep the phonics tests that Nick Gibb introduced and keep exams at the end of primary school, the SACS tests. I think that's the right thing to do. But I do worry that she's getting rid of some of the measures in both Ofsted, the inspectorate, and to do with academies that help drive improvement.
Because teachers don't like them. And the unions, they should be driven by unions, maybe.
That is my fear. Everything that she's done to curtail the freedom of academies, to stop them paying good teachers more, and also to stop failing schools being taken over by academy chains where they can be turned around, all of those things were union demands.
Yes.
No one else was asking for it.
Yeah.
So that worries me.
Regrets, maybe plopping Boris in the soup on that morning, and when I was in the audience, like I'm sure you were watching. I mean, I think it's things you've done.
I think it's difficult because I think that the whole nature of the relationship between me and Boris and so on, I feel sorry about it in all sorts of ways because I'm still a Boris fan, but each of the individial decisions
was right at the time.
It's felt right at the time, and it's difficult to disentangle all of that. And I've written about it, talked about it, I'm perfectly happy to do so. And I think, I think Boris's departure, both the manner and the timing, I felt really sad about it.
Which one? The first time?
No, in the first. So I don't think he was ready
the first time
to be Prime Minister the first time. And
2016,
it might have been better for the country overall if he had become Prime Minister, even if he wasn't, in my mind, the best candidate at that time. But he was definitely the best candidate. I ran myself in 2019. He was definitely the best candidate then. Yeah. Definitely the right man at the right time. And I know there'll be all sorts of criticism, but I do think that Boris's achievements in office, getting Brexit done, the vaccine rollout, and the support for Ukraine, they all deserve credit. And I think that the Partygate allegations actually reflected on behaviour of people working
around him
rather than him,
who maybe took a lead though from him. You see, I wonder whether
that is arguable. That is arguable, and I can entirely understand why people who were living with restrictions at the time, seeing what went on in Downing Street at that time, feel a justifiable sense of anger. So I wouldn't for a moment, seek to diminish that.
No.
But I do think that Boris needs to be judged in the round, and that I certainly think that there's far more in the credit side of the balance than the debit side of the balance with Boris.
Brexit, no regrets there. I was with you. Where were you on the day before the vote? I know where you were because I was with you.
The day before the vote.
The night before the vote on the bus.
Yes. So were we in the West Country?
No.
Or the South? We're in
Bournemouth Pier.
Bournemouth Pier.
With Conor Burns.
Oh, yes.
Penny Mordaunt. And I did a tweet on the way back, and you were in the back chatting to us. I said, if Brits vote tomorrow to leave the European Union, it's the biggest uprising since the Peasants' Revolt.
Yes.
And I just been quoted by all the early US papers that.
But you did.
It felt like it, didn't it, at the time?
It did. No, so
I didn't believe it was going to happen. So
no, I during the campaign, I thought we might win. Towards the end, I was worried that we wouldn't. And I went to bed that night thinking that we'd lost, and then was woken up to discover that we'd won.
Yes.
To this day, I think it was absolutely the right decision.
Yes.
And it's interesting even now that Keir Starmer, the man who wanted the second referendum, is now extolling the virtues of lighter regulation on artificial intelligence outside the EU. He's saying that we can do stuff in farming and on the environment better outside
jacking
the
up
EU.
fees for private schools.
Exactly.
Which you can't do
in the
even though you might hate it as a spectator.
So I think it was absolutely the right thing to have done. I don't.
Blown off course by events, by COVID and Ukraine.
Yeah, no, undoubtedly. And with a decision as big as Brexit, or a decision as big as entering the European Union, the common market in the first place, you can't make a judgment on just a few years.
Yes.
You've got to look at it with an element of perspective. And I think there are already gains that we're making. But the biggest one of all is democracy. Politicians like me can't hide behind Europe. And so people understand that they were angry about migration figures under the last government. Well, the truth is that there was no hiding from those decisions. They were decisions taken by a sovereign British government, which you either defend or apologise for. But in the past, we used to say, we can't control who comes to this country because we're in the EU.
Yes.
There are now no excuses left. It's a good thing.
You launched a campaign called the SPAF campaign.
Oh, yes.
That stands for
the Spectator Project Against Frivolous Funding.
Do you worry, though, a lot of that funding was on your watch in the Tory government?
I do.
I look at the dates, I'm afraid it was.
Oh, no, I do. No, so this is...
So why do you allow it to happen if you're in power?
A spectator emulation of Doge. And I think that one of the things that we need to do is to bring to light and into the light some of the things that happen.
Shrimps in Bangladesh and all that.
No individual minister, I'm not trying to make excuses for all of this, no individual minister can bring pressure to bear. But one of the ministers with whom I did work, who was a hero in this, was Theodore Agnew, who's written as a spectator. He was the Minister for Government Efficiency.
Resigned.
He tried incredibly hard and then resigned because other government departments were more interested in safeguarding their own, hesits in his vanity projects. And one of the things that I sought to do in all of the departments that I was in was to try to say, is this genuinely value for money? And at times I succeeded. When we were at the Department for Education, we dramatically reduced the number of spin doctors, the grants that were given to NGOs lobbying against government policy.
Yes.
It was difficult in some other departments, but we did succeed in both of the Cabinet Office and when I was in DEFRA in closing down some boondoggles. But it's tough.
Yeah, and is that the blob that makes it tough? And what is the blob? The blob, some said to be the blob is basically 30 years of ministers trying to change law to stop things happening, and you create a big thicket of stuff that stops you doing things.
Yes, so the blob is a very useful phrase that can describe certain things, but ultimately it's the interest of a bureaucracy in keeping things as they are and being risk-averse. So it's the interest of the bureaucracy in saying, I run the aid budget, Chris, you're my friend in this NGO, I hand over the cheque, you say, good old Michael, he's saving the world's poor.
Yes.
I get the cheque and I get to spend it on Sri Lankan shrimps or whatever it might be.
Yes.
And I keep my people happy. Ultimately, the risk is it's a conspiracy against the public and the taxpayer, which is why you need to shine the light on it.
Which is happening now.
And force people to justify it.
Yes. Looking now at the Tory party, you obviously backed Kemi Badenoch the first time she ran. I imagine the second time she ran, you're back to 2.
Are you
on speed dial?
Yeah, no, we didn't endorse anyone at the Spectator, but I did, as a Tory party member, vote for Kemi.
I know you're on speed dial. You're advising her?
No.
You've moved on.
I am now a journalist first and foremost. My duty is towards Spectator readers.
Yes.
I like and admire people in politics. I hugely admire Kemi, but she is her own person, as anyone who's worked with her recognises.
She's a work in progress. How is she doing? I mean, I think she's a work in progress.
I think she's doing a very good job. It is uniquely difficult to be leader of the opposition immediately after your party has lost office. It was
not unique. Happened before.
Yeah, but it's very difficult. It's difficult if you are William Hague. Difficult for Ed Miliband.
Yes.
So there is one model, you're right, that succeeded. Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah.
And then the other point, and comparisons between Kemi and Margaret Thatcher can be overdone.
Yeah.
So the one point is, Margaret Thatcher, had a very rocky press and a lot of criticism early on. Criticism tended to come from the grandees of the centre-left, the West.
Yeah.
And now, the criticism tends to come from
the right.
And the big difference, again, is with reform, 5 MPs, more than 20% in the polls at the moment. Margaret Thatcher never had that rival on the right that Kemi does. So it's important that the Conservative Party, I think, makes a mature judgment about how to deal with reform. And I think that judgment has to be, you can't outdo reform in terms of the anger that they articulate, and there's a lot of legitimate anger out there. Where you can do better than reform is in the answers to the different questions we face. And my analysis is that the policies that Kemi put forward the other week, particularly on immigration, particularly on indefinite leave to remain, were the most detailed propositions, solutions, I think, to some of the problems that we face that any party leader has put forward.
And it's also taking responsibility for a Tory policy that went wrong.
Yeah.
She said that migration was too high.
What?
Let's not give British citizenship to them until they've earned the right to be here. I thought
Totally.
that logically made sense.
Yeah, and it's a way of both not just acknowledging fault, but also correcting it.
And it's the first policy she had, which wasn't in response to a Labour government. So that's also interesting. She said in a speech on Monday, didn't she, that we've been naive, we the party have been naive on issues from net zero to immigration, strength the argument, immigration too high. Are you comfortable with her criticising your record in government?
Yes. Because I think you've got to be honest about where you went wrong. So I am, for what it's worth, I think I'm more supportive of the environmental policies of the last government than Kemi would be. I think she's a harsher and sterner critic, but I think she is right that the current desire to, Ed Miliband's desire to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2030, that is just too fast, damaging other parts of our economy. But I would certainly say, and this is not a criticism of Kemi, she may well be right and I may well be wrong. But I also think that there were things that we did in order to safeguard wildlife, to invest in nature, which are right. I think that the green stand, not the eco-zealot strand, but the green strand of tourism is important.
Which you brought when you were Environment Secretary, that was one of your big ideas. Is reform a right or left? Is reform a right-wing or left-wing party?
I think it's pretty right-wing. And I think that one of the criticisms of reform sometimes is that they take what's being viewed as a left-wing position on economic issues. With talk of state intervention saving the steel industry. Here at this ARC conference, we've had a debate about that. And I'm not endorsing reform, but I do think that there's an argument that Conservatives needs to have, again, about how laissez-faire you need to be. And I'm one of those people who think that a Conservative government, like Trump, can say, hey, we believe manufacturing is good. We believe industry is good. That means not just keeping energy costs low, but sometimes thinking about how we can maintain our own domestic steel supply, because that's critical for our defence sector. So I don't think that the Reform's position there means that they're not a party on the right. What I think is the case is at the moment they haven't got the strength in depth. So I think it's perfectly legit for Reform to ask these questions, but I haven't seen a detailed reform economic prospectus that would explain how they would support industry and manufacturing.
Should they merge, the Tories and Reform?
I don't think so, no, because I think all talk of merger is a way of avoiding tough questions for both parties. So the Conservatives have got to show that they've learned all the right lessons from the past. If they do, then I don't think they will be in a position to take government again. Reform have got to show that they have a programme that is as coherent and more persuasive than the Conservatives. And I think when you talk about pacts, that's, to my mind, that's politicians attempting to stitch things up for their convenience rather than being honest with the public. Let the public choose. Now, my own view is that the public will overwhelmingly at the next election, on the basis of everything I know at the moment, choose the Conservatives. But my feeling is, talking about pacts at this stage is an attempt to act as a shepherd. Getting the voters into one single pen.
Yes.
Let the sheep safely graze and decide which field they want to be in.
Is there time for that, though, with Farage?
Well, I think
causing havoc in the hen house while there's all the sheep and the sheep.
My view again is there should be a battle of ideas across the political landscape.
Yes.
And I've got firm preferences, but at the Spectator, like on GBUs, we will have people who are Conservative, Reform, none of the above. And, at this stage, I think the public deserve to hear and to make their own mind up. And simultaneously, if there are things that this Labour government does right, we should acknowledge it. If Keir Starmer says the right things about Ukraine, I mean, he may be a disaster in other areas, but he's our Prime Minister, and at a time of crisis, then if he is doing the right thing, he deserves the credit.
Do you regret mismanaging Farage? I say that because he was really... He's cross. He's really cross about 2019. He felt he stood down quite a good calibre of candidates to bequeath that Brexit majority to get Brexit done and never got any thanks in his world. This is what he says.
No,
respect, you see,
I do respect it. And I disagree with him about a number of things.
Yes.
But again, I think that this whole notion of handling. So I think it is absolutely right that Nigel Farage and others in Reform are owed respect.
Yep.
Part of that respect is disagreement. They're grown up enough to know where I might disagree with them on particular policy issues or where others will. But again, I think, it's not about managing Nigel. If Nigel or anyone else thinks, do you know what, I disagree with this party and this government.
Yes.
I'm going to offer myself up for election.
Yes.
That is democracy.
Yes. Donald Trump, you met him.
Yes.
You interviewed him after you left government in 2016, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
You were in the Oval Office interviewing him then. Should we fear what's coming next? I mean, there's lots of fear on the left, isn't there?
Yeah, no, there is. So I just
you fear him?
No, I think you've got to be realistic. So there is no point lamenting what might have been.
Yeah.
You've got to deal with Trump as he is.
Would you vote for him? Would you vote for Kamala Harris? I think he said Kamala Harris.
I did, but I actually think that if I'd had my time again, I would erase that judgment because I think Trump has been a net positive.
You'd vote Trump now?
Yeah, I think that...
Wow.
I do worry about Ukraine. I do worry about the position there, but I also think that the problems that we had with Ukraine set in well before Trump's position in the White House, and I hope that Boris is right, that Trump will be able to secure a deal which actually allows Ukraine to rearm, to reinforce, to rebuild. Let's see. But in other areas, in tackling what one might call woke politics, in getting greater efficiency within government, in making sure that we move away from some of the politically correct obsessions of the past. I think that Donald Trump and the associated vibe shift have been a good thing.
You referred, you heard J.D. Vance's speech in Munich on Friday, and you said you must read every word in full to your followers on the social media.
Yes.
Is that because you're dismissing people on reading parts of it, dismissing their concerns, worse yet, shutting down media elections? The idea of this shutting down, stifling debate is what drives TV News Views bananas, and I think what Vance was getting at.
Totally. So you don't need to agree with everything that J.D. Vance said, and you don't need to approve of the examples that he picked to recognise that he was making a very powerful argument. It is wrong to say elections need to be closed down because you don't like what's happening on social media. I personally believe it is wrong to say that someone cannot pray silently because you have a particular view on abortion.
Even 50 yards from the front of the abortion clinic.
Absolutely.
Well, your government brought those in. Your government brought the bubble downs in.
For me, free speech is as close to a fundamental principle as any.
Yeah.
And so is freedom of worship. Now, of course, when people are making a very difficult choice over the future of their unborn child, there should be care and sensitivity expressed. And if there is genuine intimidation or people are behaving in an ugly way.
Yes.
But prayer,
Well, no.
that's at the foundation of the country that we have. There are prayers in the House of Commons at the beginning of every day.
You're against ditching those, I suppose.
Totally. The Lord's Prayer is it used to be repeated and said in an act of Christian worship in every school across the country. So I'm not trying to remoralize the nation. I'm not saying that everyone should believe, but you can't understand Britain without understanding our Judeo-Christian traditions. And more than that, whatever your religious beliefs, freedom of conscience and freedom of religion are fundamental freedoms that I would hope that GV News viewers and listeners would believe that we should all defend.
I'm sure they do. It's part of the problem is we don't have it written down. We have an understanding of it.
Yes.
And that's being eroded, I think.
Yes.
At the edges. Perhaps we need time for different conversation about a written constitution, but not for now. But maybe that's the time for a written constitution.
I'm not in favour of that. What I'm
You're
in
not.
favour of are people not so much writing down the Constitution, but reading about our past. So reading Milton's Areopagitica, reading John Locke, reading J.S. Mill, understanding the importance of these freedoms. Not all of those writers were right about everything, but they were right that free speech is critical.
The one line I thought from Vance's speech, he said there that people care about their homes, their dreams, their safety, their capacity to provide for themselves and their children. That, to me, is at the heart of what Morgan McSweeney's doing for Labour.
Yes,
that's the blue Labour view.
Yeah.
This my concentric circles: home, town, country, border, and that's what I think. That's why I think Vance is on something. And that's
Yes, I think he was. I think it was interesting that there's a figure who now appears on GD News, Maurice Glaston, Lord Glaston, a Labour peer, great man, who was invited by J.D. Vance to the inauguration. Odd that a Labour politician might be invited. But the reason why is that Maurice Glaston and his notion of blue Labour believes that in left-wing interventionism in the economy, but they believe in social conservatism, strong defence, family, when it comes to non-economic policies. And it's certainly the case that everything we hear says that Morgan McSweeney, Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff, is very sympathetic to that outlook. And certainly in The Spectator the other week, we were reporting on the fact that Morgan McSweeney wants Keir Starmer to strengthen our defences, take a tough line on borders and a tough line on crime.
Yeah. What's next for you? Return to politics, or is it gone? Is that the rear mirror around the corner?
I will be doing everything I can to keep The Spectator great. I don't need to make it great again. It was made great under Fraser Nelson. I want to keep it great. I want more people to read what our great journalists are producing, our great columnists, Rod Liddell, Douglas Murray, Lionel Shriver. Hope you'll write for us, Chris.
Yes, happily to.
I do a political diary for you in the next
of course.
And also, what I want to do is I want to see basic conservative ideas win, because I think that's what the country needs.
Yes.
And give a platform to people from whatever tradition who are putting forward these ideas.
So no to politics, but you might accept a peerage.
Well,
if one comes, you're reported to be anyone from Richmond.
It is not for me.
Not for you.
To say who the king should appoint to advisor in the upper house. I'm sure the king will make the right decision.
I've been to two of your leadership launches, I think, or maybe three. Was it two or three times you ran? I think twice.
Two.
So I went to both. Have you ditched all thought about being PM?
Oh God, yes.
Yes, and it's a relief not to have to worry about it anymore. Before we go, I've got a guest here. Mary Rees-Mogg. Mary, are you there? Mary, she has got some tarot cards.
Oh, my Lord.
She wants you to do some tarot cards to look at your future.
Oh, right.
Here she comes now.
We had a piece in The Spectator this
About
week
tarot cards.
about tarot.
Okay.
Now, I'm very, because it's Mary, I will go along, but I'm very anti
This kind of thing.
very anti.
Can you see the
very-
do you see this on your?
I'm very.
Do you mind doing this then?
No, I don't mind it at all.
So tarot cards actually were invented in the 15th century in Italy, and they were just a game of cards played by the nobles, and they only became associated with reading the future in the late 19th century, and then there was just a huge boom in popularity. And they're very popular nowadays, especially with the youth. You'll find lots of TikTok tarot readings and things like that. So what I'm going to do with you is past, present, future.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you to pick one card, put it down, and then so on. Yeah, and so take 3 cards and try and
Hold up
pick
the camera. The camera's there, so hold up the camera.
pick the card that you feel kind of drawn to. You know, you kind of feel.
Past.
So don't flip that over yet.
Sorry.
That's your past.
Sorry.
Try not to flip the card. Just put it down as you
Down,
as you get it. So that's your present.
Present.
And then the future.
Okay.
This is future.
This is your future. So
Okay.
let's see your cards. So your past is 3 pentacles. So this is minor arcana.
Show it to the camera. That's Michael Gove's past.
That's
3
his past.
pentacles,
3
right.
pentacles. Which let's have a look at.
Okay, look
3
it up.
Pentacles. So symbolizes collaboration, teamwork, and craftsmanship.
Take that,
Working
would you?
together to achieve common goals, valued contributions, leveraging diverse talents, and you've created something of lasting value. So that's probably reminiscing on your political career. That's pretty good. Yes, that's pretty good. Your present
Present.
is reverse Ace of Swords,
Oh my lord.
which is also minor arcana.
So we are reverse ace
Yeah.
of swords. You got that? Okay, there we are. That's the present. That's the Spectator for you.
Yes.
Yeah, that is. We'll go back to the beginning, flick through the book. Indicates confusion or mental blockages. Yes, so urges seeking clarity and cutting through illusions or falsehoods.
Yes.
Focus on resolving conflicts and gaining clarity to move forward with confidence. So you've got to have a bit of confidence in yourself, Michael.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the end. It's all over. Yeah.
Exactly.
okay, yeah.
And
The
then
future, here it
your
is.
future is reverse temperance.
Reverse
So just do that.
temperance.
Yeah. Which is, that's major arcana. So it's quite a substantial card, essentially. And
Does that mean off the booze or something? Is that dry
It
through?
indicates imbalance or extremism. Beware of overindulgence or impulsiveness. To regain balance in your life, moderate your actions or desires. Take time to reflect on your priorities and find ways to harmonize. Avoid rushing into decisions or succumbing to extremes. Practice patience and self-discipline. So maybe that is a dry
Okay, we'll take that.
thing. Yeah.
Your tarot reading is complete.
Incredibly helpful.
Yes. Well, you've had a brilliant political career.
Uh-huh.
You know.
And now you look at this period of uncertainty. I must avoid rushing in.
And
Yes.
you've got to be very careful. Make good decisions. Have a lasting impact.
Michael Gove,
Yeah,
thank you for
Michael
joining us
Gove.
today on Chopper's Political Podcast.
Thank you.
Don't go anywhere. I'm going to wrap up into that camera there. Maybe we'll move that way. Thank you for listening to wherever you are and watching wherever you are to Chopper's Political Podcast this week. I tweet at Christopher Hope on X. What's your Twitter account, Michael Gove?
Oh, I forgot it. At Michael Gove.
It wasn't something else. It was in Mrs. Blurt's back in the day.
Back in the day.
Goodness me, that dates me a bit. So email me, chopper@gbnews.uk. If you enjoyed this podcast, please do tell your friends. If you really enjoyed it, please leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify so that other people find this podcast. There's a Spectator podcast called, Michael, what's your podcast?
Coffee House Shots.
There we are. Watch that, listen to that. That's really good by my colleagues at The Spectator. Thank the great team of GB News colleagues behind this podcast. Mick Booker and Jeff Marsh back at HQ. Rebecca Nunes and George McMillan on the road. And most importantly, all again, thank you for listening. If you want more Chopper in your life, and Michael Gove does, and I do too, catch me during the week on GB News and during the week with all our best political coverage and reporting. Keep up to date with our best reporting on our website, gbnews.com. Until next time, cheerio!